Today we have a crazy story of revenge, all for the sake of protecting a friend. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, if you want to scam, don't be greedy doing it. Not everyone does foolish things that end up hurting lots of people, like messing up the water system or spreading a ridiculous rumor about someone, even if we knew it could not be true. But we would admit that at least once in our life, we've all done something stupid. It would take lots of energy to admit that we actually allowed ourselves to be in that kind of situation. Whether you choose to admit it or not in this moment, it is the truth. You know it and I do too. Why? Because I found myself in that kind of scenario one too many times. My name is Nixon and this is one of those times. Usually I appear as any random person who enjoys shopping online and sometimes dabbles in new online investments or gambling as the case may be, and most times I try to be as careful as I can. I've heard one too many stories of these things going wrong and I was certain there was no way I would fall victim to it. But life doesn't happen the way we want it to. And one day, I got caught in a scam that I would never have expected, and it changed everything. It started like any other day. I was at home browsing the internet for some interesting investment opportunities. You know how it is, scrolling through pages and pages of promising deals and too good to be true offers. I've always been cautious, but this one particular offer grabbed my attention. It seemed legitimate, with professional design, numerous positive reviews, and glowing testimonials from supposedly satisfied customers. The investment opportunity promised high returns with minimal risk, which sounded perfect. I decided to dig a little deeper. I visited forums, checked review sites, and even searched for any warning signs about the platform. Everything seemed clean. There were no red flags and no warnings, at least not more than the usual negative feedback that every product online has, and on a balancing scale, the array of positive feedback I saw evened it out. I felt a bit more confident about it, thinking I had done my due diligence. Feeling reassured, I took the plunge. I created an account on the platform and invested a substantial amount of money. At first, everything went smoothly. The site was responsive and I received prompt and courteous replies from a representative named Noel. Obviously, that was not his real name. He seemed genuinely helpful, answering all my questions and providing detailed information about the investment process. It all felt very professional and above board. It pains me to say and admit, but while the transaction continued, I didn't hear that alarm bell ringing in my head telling me that I was making a huge mistake. It wasn't until I'd completed all that was required and a few days had passed that I began to recount the steps I took and the promptness with which I carried out the transaction. The concluding evidence of me being scammed came a few days after my initial investment when the website suddenly became unresponsive. My attempts to log in were met with error messages. Panic started to set in. I tried reaching out to Noel, but my messages went unanswered. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been scammed. My hard-earned money was gone and I had no way of getting it back. It was a tough pill to swallow. I felt angry, embarrassed, and incredibly foolish for falling for such a scheme. I was in shock. I couldn't believe I'd been scammed. I felt a mix of disbelief and frustration, my mind racing with thoughts of what I could have done differently. How could I have missed the signs? I had always prided myself on being cautious. Yet here I was, a victim of a cleverly crafted scam. I tried everything, contacting customer support, the bank, and even the authorities, but nothing worked. Customer support was useless. They either didn't respond or gave generic, unhelpful replies. My bank said that they couldn't do much because I had willingly transferred the money. The authorities took my report, but I could tell they had little hope of recovering my lost funds. With each dead end I reached, the more my anger and frustration got more fuel to fight. But the nights were the worst. I lay awake replaying the events in my mind, feeling the sting of betrayal over and over again. I kept thinking about Noel and how easily he had tricked me. His polite emails and reassuring messages now seemed like mocking taunts. It was infuriating to think about how he was probably enjoying the money he stole from me and others like me. And during those nights, when I stayed up checking my mail for a response from Noel, I searched deeper into the internet, much more than I did at first, and it amazed me how I failed to read in between the lines. I was amazed at how I didn't see the repetitions in the supposed reviews that show the reviews came from just one source. At some point, I began to wonder if Noel and his cohorts had employed some unnatural means or powers that subjected my rationality to their ploy. I had lots of questions unanswered, but one thing was clear regardless: I couldn't just sit back and accept this. The more I thought about it, the more determined I became to do something. I spent hours researching online, reading about other scams and how victims had fought back. Stories of people who had managed to track down their scammers gave me a glimmer of hope. If they could do it, why couldn't I? Then, it all seemed like wishful thinking till it was not. I began compiling every piece of information I had about Noel and the scam. I created a file with screenshots of our emails, transaction records, and anything else that might be useful. I was determined to find a way to get my money back, but more importantly, to make Noel pay for what he had done. I used every tool I could find online to track down Noel. With how vast the internet is, I knew that if I dug deep enough, I might find some clues. I started by searching through forums where other scam victims shared their experiences. It was comforting to know that I wasn't alone, but that wasn't the main aim. I wanted to see if the same scam was on the platforms too, and soon enough, I realized that I needed help. That's when I turned to my friend Lena. Lena is a tech wizard, the kind of person who can find anything or anyone online. When I told her about my situation, she was more than willing to assist. She was shocked to hear what actually happened, but after she saw me, Lena had always enjoyed a good challenge, and tracking down a scammer was right up her alley. We started by going through all the emails Noel had sent me. Lena showed me how to examine the email headers, looking for IP addresses and other technical details that might give away Noel's location. We found that Noel was using various methods to hide his tracks, but there were subtle patterns and inconsistencies that Lena said we could use to our advantage. Next, Lena helped me dive into social media. We searched for profiles that matched Noel's name and any other information we had. It was like finding a needle in a haystack, but Lena had tools that could automate some of the work, cross-referencing data across multiple platforms. After several long nights of searching, we found a profile that seemed to match. The profile was sparse, but there were enough details to give us hope. Lena also introduced me to the dark web, a place where scammers sometimes slip up and reveal too much. It was a bit intimidating at first, but with Lena guiding me, we managed to find forums and marketplaces where Noel might have operated. We didn't find Noel directly, but we found other scammers talking about him. It seemed he was well known in certain circles, which only made me more determined to bring him down. Finally, after weeks of relentless searching, we hit gold. Well, I won't call it gold because it led us further into digging, but it was something. One of Noel's online aliases slipped up, posting a photo that had metadata attached. Lena showed me how to extract this information, revealing a location. It wasn't a precise address, but it was a city, a starting point. With this, Lena found better ways to fish out his identity. From that one lead in the haystack, we found a few new leads. Rental records, utility bills, and eventually, a name that matched one of the aliases Noel used. It felt like we were closing in, but knowing his identity was just one of the things I had in store for Noel, or should I say, Charles, because that happens to be his real name. I crafted a convincing fake profile with a believable backstory. The key was to appear wealthy and naive, someone Noel would find irresistible as a target. I used high-quality photos, created a background that mirrored the kind of high-profile lifestyle that many celebrities flaunt online, and filled the profile with lavish posts about expensive hobbies and travels. Every detail had to be perfect to lure Noel in. I made initial contact with Noel, posing as this affluent but inexperienced investor. I played the part perfectly, expressing interest in a new investment opportunity and mentioning how I'd inherited a substantial amount of money but had no idea how to manage it. It was something many high-profile individuals were doing, so it didn't raise any red flags for him. For someone who was into scamming people, Noel seemed to have let his guard down. Maybe it was sheer luck or perhaps a bad case of karma catching up with him. Noel took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. He responded quickly, his messages dripping with eagerness and faux professionalism. He didn't suspect a thing. I kept the conversation going, asking all the right questions to make me seem genuinely interested yet clueless about investments. It was a delicate balance, making myself seem vulnerable without overdoing it. As we continued to communicate, Noel started sharing details about the amazing investment opportunity he had for me. He provided fake documents, websites, and even testimonials from supposedly satisfied clients. It was similar to the one I initially fell for. I played along, acting more and more excited about the potential returns. I convinced Noel to invest a large sum of money in my fake opportunity. It took some careful maneuvering and a lot of patience. I had to build trust and make him believe that I was genuinely interested in making him a partner in this exclusive investment deal. I spun a story about a lucrative venture that was sure to bring enormous returns but required a significant upfront investment that I could not afford alone. The payment was to be made to a third party, so it appeared like I didn't have anything to hide as I was paying my share. Our interactions escalated, with Noel growing more excited about the potential returns. He was practically salivating at the thought of making a quick and substantial profit. I could see his eagerness in his messages, his excitement palpable through the screen. He kept asking for more details, and I provided just enough to keep him hooked without revealing anything that could make him suspicious. The moment of triumph came when Noel transferred a large sum of money to my fake account. I had set up a completely fictitious bank account, complete with an elaborate facade to make it look legitimate. That was where I sent my own share of the payment to. Watching the transfer notification pop up on my screen was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. I felt a deep sense of satisfaction and justice, knowing that the scammer was finally getting a taste of his own medicine. I decided it was time to reveal my true identity to Noel. I sent him a message, no longer pretending to be the naive investor. I told him who I really was and how I had the entire plan to get back at him for scamming me. I could almost imagine the look of shock and disbelief on his face as he read my words. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt truly victorious. Noel had underestimated me, and now he was paying the price. But I could anticipate the intensity with which he would use to scam his next victim in a bid to recover the money I stole from him. Well, not stole, took. I simply took back what he stole from me, maybe with a little cherry on top. I'm just assuming whatever money Noel took from OP was pretty substantial, as OP described it, because I feel like a lot of people in OP's situation would kind of accept that they lost that money as some kind of I was being stupid tax and move on with their life and learn from that. But for OP to essentially dedicate their life to getting revenge, they must have messed up big time with a lot of money. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy crazy stories of revenge, it would be amazing if you left a like or left a review if you're listening to my podcast. That said, our next story is, I outsmarted a greedy landlord at his own game. I used to share my law office with Aaron, a friend I met in law school. It was tucked away in a large commercial building in the heart of the city. I'm a lawyer known for my meticulous nature and determination. My office is a sanctuary of order with neatly stacked files and a tidy desk, a stark contrast to the chaos often found in my line of work. The building itself, however, is another story. It's a sprawling complex with a notorious landlord who thrives on making tenants' lives miserable. His reputation for harassing tenants with unreasonable demands and sudden threats of changing locks if they fall behind on rent is well known. The mere mention of his name makes tenants groan in frustration. A few years back, there was a small boutique run by Clara, a single mother. The landlord, in his usual fashion, began demanding extra fees for building maintenance, claiming the roof needed repairs despite it being in perfect condition. When Clara couldn't pay the exorbitant fees, he locked her out overnight without warning. She arrived the next morning with her customers waiting to find a for lease sign and all of her inventory stuck inside. Forced to move, she lost half her clientele. Amidst all this, the only good thing that came from the building was a very cool restaurant in the basement named The Vault. The name comes from an old massive bank vault that the restaurant has cleverly integrated into its decor. I visit the vault almost daily for lunch, enjoying the serene escape it offers from the constant pressures of legal work. It's during one of these routine visits that the restaurant owner, a friend I've come to know well, confides in me about the landlord's latest outrageous demands, setting the stage for a confrontation that would test all my cunning and legal know-how. I was seated at my usual spot, just about ready to devour my favorite pasta dish, when Manuel, the owner, walked towards me with a worried look on his face. "Can I join you for a moment?" he asked. "Of course, Manuel," I replied, gesturing to the empty chair. He sighed heavily as he sat down. "The landlord's driving me nuts again," he began, his voice tinged with frustration. I put my fork down and leaned in. "What's he up to this time?" Manuel handed me a letter, his hand shaking slightly. He's demanding extra rent and payment for repairs dating back years. Snow removal, parking lot repairs, common area flooring. He's charging me for everything under the sun. I scanned the letter, my eyes widening at the sheer audacity of the demands. These expenses are ridiculous. And what's this about the bank vault? Manuel grimaced. He's insisting that I remove the vault before I move out. Says it's my responsibility to restore the place to its original state. That would cost me a fortune. I frowned, recognizing the landlord's ploy to squeeze every last penny out of Manuel. Let me take a look at your lease, I said. Bring it up to my office this afternoon. When I returned to the office, the lease was already waiting for me. I started to read through the dense legal jargon. As I flipped through the pages, I stumbled upon a personal guarantee clause. Manuel hadn't just signed as the restaurant owner, he'd also personally guaranteed the lease. This means he was on the hook for the vault removal and all the other outrageous demands, potentially ruining him financially. The situation was dire, but I wasn't about to let the landlord get away with this. I leaned back in my chair, the wheels turning in my mind. There's got to be a way out of this, I thought, and then it hit me. A plan so cunning that it might just work. I picked up the phone and called Manuel. Manuel, I've got a plan, but it's going to require some trust and a bit of risk. I'm all ears, he replied, a hint of hope creeping into his voice. We're going to demand that the landlord release all your equipment and the vault. Then we'll set up a scenario where he thinks there's a potential tenant who wants that vault. He won't let you take it, and you can move out, leaving the vault behind. Manuel chuckled, the first sign of relief I'd heard in days, and said, "Let's do it." As soon as Manuel agreed, I knew we had to move quickly. I started by outlining the plan in detail. First, we need to demand the release of all your restaurant equipment and the vault, I said, pacing my office. You have to act like the vault is essential to your new location. This will make the landlord think twice. Manuel nodded, jotting down notes. And then we set the trap, I continued, a smile forming. I'll hire a real estate agent to pretend to be a potential tenant, someone who is very interested in the property, specifically the vault. With the plan set, I called Aaron. Aaron, I need a real estate agent, I said. He chuckled on the other end of the line. Another one of your schemes? Just a little something to help a friend, I replied, giving him the details. Aaron, always having connections, put me in touch with an agent named Jim. The next day, I met Jim at a cafe near my office. I explained the situation, laying out every detail of the plan. I need you to act as a potential tenant. Show a lot of interest in the property, but make it clear that the vault is a deal breaker. You want it there, intact. Jim leaned back, considering. This is a risky move, but it could work. I'll do it. We agreed on the terms and Jim got to work immediately. He contacted the landlord expressing his supposed interest in the space. I represent a client who's very interested in leasing the basement unit, he told the landlord, but the main attraction for us is that old bank vault. It's exactly what we need. The landlord, sensing an opportunity to make a lucrative deal, bit the bait. His greed and overconfidence blinded him to the fact that he was being played. As the days passed, Manuel and I waited anxiously, hoping our ruse would pay off. Jim was darn good at his job. So convinced, the landlord became eager to secure a lucrative deal. He was all in to lease the basement space to a new tenant who valued the vault. Confident that he had a new tenant lined up, he refused Manuel's demand to take the vault. The vault stays, he declared, his voice dripping with smug satisfaction. My new tenant insists on it. Manuel and I exchanged a knowing glance. The trap was set, and the landlord had walked right into it. Manuel wasted no time. Within days, he had packed up all the restaurant equipment and relocated to his new place, a charming spot across town. The new location was perfect, free from the landlord's harassment, and Manuel was able to create an even better atmosphere than before. As the final boxes were loaded, Manuel turned to me with a smile. Thanks to you, I'm leaving this nightmare behind without that financial burden. I nodded. It's not over yet, but we're close. A few days after Manuel moved out, I was back at my office when Aaron walked in. You hear about the landlord? He asked, a grin playing on his lips. I said no. What happened? He's furious. Apparently the deal with the new tenant fell through. They backed out when they found out they couldn't remove the vault. I chuckled and said, serves him right. The landlord, realizing he'd been duped, stormed into my office the next day. his face red with anger. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he spat, jabbing a finger in my direction. "I know you're behind this. That agent was a plant and you tricked me into keeping the vault. Now my property's unsellable." I leaned back in my chair, feigning innocence, saying, "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb with me," he snapped. "You and that restaurant owner tricked me. You knew I'd refuse to let him take the vault if I thought I had a new tenant lined up. Now my property is worthless with that massive vault still there and I've lost a deal." I leaned back, folding my hands in my lap. "I'm not sure what you're talking about," I said, maintaining my composure. "The restaurant owner simply moved out. You made the decision about the vault on your own." His face turned even redder. "I'll sue you and the restaurant owner. This was a setup." I shook my head slowly. "You can try, but there's no binding contract." The letter of intent from the supposed new tenant was non-binding. There was no formal lease signed, so you have nothing to sue on. The landlord's expression shifted from rage to realization. He knew I was right. Without a contract, he had no legal ground to stand on. His shoulders slumped in defeat and he glared at me one last time before turning to leave. "You'll regret this," he muttered as he stormed out. I watched him go, feeling a sense of triumph. Manuel was free from the landlord's tyranny and the landlord himself was left with an empty property and a massive bank vault that made the space practically unleasable. His own greed had led to his downfall, and there was nothing he could do about it. I leaned back in my chair, a smile spreading across my face. Sometimes the best revenge is simply outsmarting your opponent at their own game. With a move complete, Manuel's restaurant quickly became a local sensation in its new location. Free from the constant harassment and unreasonable demands of the greedy landlord, the restaurant flourished. The new spot was more spacious and Manuel had put his heart into making it even more inviting than before. Regulars from the old place followed and new customers came in droves, attracted by the restaurant's unique charm and excellent food. One evening, Manuel invited me to dinner at the new place. As we sat at a table near the window, he looked around with a satisfied smile. "I can't thank you enough for what you did," he said, raising his glass. "If it weren't for you, I'd still be stuck dealing with that nightmare." I clinked my glass against his. "You did the hard part by trusting me and taking the risk. I'm glad it worked out for you." The success of Manuel's restaurant was the perfect contrast to the empty basement in our old building. Every time I walked past that building and saw the "For Rent" sign still hanging in the window, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Reflecting on the whole ordeal, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of accomplishment. Outsmarting the greedy landlord and helping Manuel escape his clutches had been incredibly rewarding. I had used my knowledge and skills to turn the tables on someone who thrived on exploiting others, and it felt good to see justice served in such a satisfying way. To be honest, I kind of just want to see what the bank vault restaurant kind of thing looked like. I almost kind of feel like that's so stylistic for a restaurant, it would be hard for it not to at least be floatable. Like, I'm surprised they'd even want to kick Manuel out. I almost wonder if this is a situation where it's like rent controlled and they just wanted to kick Manuel out so they can charge somebody else way more on the initial fee and just make more money. That said, our next story is "Come for my friend and I'll ruin your life." I love my friends and more, so I pride myself on the ability to always help those in need, especially when it comes to my closest friends. And as an attorney, I regularly see my fair share of deceit and betrayal, but nothing prepared me for the day my best friend Alicia came to me in tears. Alicia is one of the kindest people I know, always willing to lend a hand and trust people at face value. Unfortunately, this kind-heartedness led her to make a naive mistake that would soon turn into a nightmare. It all started a few months ago when Alicia met a guy online. His name was Lucas and he seemed like the perfect gentleman. They connected over shared interests and quickly struck up an online friendship. Lucas was charming, attentive, and most importantly, seemed trustworthy. They spent hours chatting, sharing stories, and even exchanging pictures. Alicia, being the open-hearted person she is, didn't think twice about sending him some private pictures when he asked. After all, they had built what she thought was a solid foundation of trust. However, it seemed Alicia's innocent soul, as she is, noticed his red flags a little too late. Lucas's behavior became increasingly possessive and erratic. He would get angry if she didn't respond immediately and made strange demands. Sensing something was off, Alicia decided to back out of the online relationship. That's when Lucas showed his true colors. He threatened to post the private pictures she had sent him on all social media accounts unless she complied with his demands. Alicia was devastated. She felt trapped, humiliated, and helpless. In her moment of desperation, she turned to me for help, her eyes red from crying and her voice trembling with fear. I was nothing short of livid as she recounted the events. No one, I mean no one, messes with my friends and gets away with it on my watch. Alicia didn't deserve this. I assured her that we would ensure Lucas faced his actions' consequences. With limited information, just his first name, screen name, and some details about his work and location, I knew it wouldn't be easy, but as an attorney, I had the skills and resources to track him down and ensure he paid for what he did. I promised Alicia that I would handle everything and bring Lucas to justice. She deserved to feel safe and have her life back. It was her, even, that provided me with the few information she knew about him, including a rough idea of where he lived and the type of work he did. It wasn't much, but it was a good place to start. The first thing I did was to do an online digging. I began by searching his screen name on various social media platforms. After some digging, I found a TikTok page that matched his screen name. His videos showed a confident man enjoying life and flaunting his hobbies, but there were enough personal details to give me a lead. Scrolling through his TikTok profile, I found a video where he mentioned his Instagram handle. It was a small victory, but every piece of information counted. I quickly jumped to Instagram and started piecing together more details about his life. His Instagram account was more personal, with photos of himself, his friends, and places he had visited. One photo in particular caught my attention, a picture of him at a workplace, wearing a branded polo shirt with a company logo. Using the name from his Instagram profile and the company logo, I searched for him on LinkedIn. It didn't take long to find his profile. There he was, with his full name, occupation, and a list of professional accomplishments that painted a picture of a successful individual. But I needed more concrete evidence to link this LinkedIn profile to the man who threatened Alicia. I carefully compared the pictures he sent to Alicia with those on his social media accounts. The facial features, the distinctive birthmark on his left cheek, and even the unique design on his motorcycle's license plate all matched perfectly. The branded polo shirt and the LinkedIn photo confirmed his place of work. Everything was falling into place. To make sure I had the right person, I continued to gather more pictures of him. I found photos of him at various events, some with timestamps and locations that match the details he had shared with Alicia. One picture showed him at a company event, holding a certificate with his full name on it. Another picture showed him on his motorcycle, the license plate clearly visible. I cross-referenced all this information, building a solid case that this man, Lucas, was indeed the one who had threatened Alicia. With his full name, occupation, and workplace confirmed, I had all the evidence I needed to move forward. With his identity confirmed, the next thing I did was to compile proof of his threats and misconduct. I needed to build a pile of evidence that would leave no room for doubt. This part involved carefully gathering every piece of evidence that linked Lucas to his abominable actions. First, I started with the screenshots of the threatening messages Lucas had sent to Alicia. These messages were vile and clear evidence of his intent to publish her private pictures if she didn't comply with his demands. Each screenshot showed his screen name and the exact words he used to intimidate and coerce her. Next, I collected all the pictures Lucas had sent to Alicia. These photos included his face, distinctive features, and even some personal items that were unique to him. These pictures were crucial in confirming that the man in the screenshots was indeed Lucas. Among the pictures Lucas had sent was one of him at his workplace, which showed him using his work laptop. This picture not only confirmed his employment, but also displayed proprietary information on his laptop screen. This was a significant breach of his company's policies and added another layer to his misconduct. Further evidence came from screenshots of Lucas discussing inappropriate behavior at work. In these conversations, he bragged about having sex with an ex in his office and made plans to do the same with Alicia. These discussions were time-stamped, providing a clear record of his intentions and actions. To link all this to his workplace, I identified his employer through his LinkedIn profile. The company's logo on his polo shirt and the photos he sent to Alicia matched the one on his LinkedIn profile. I then gathered contact information for key personnel at his company. The CEO, the VP of HR, operations manager, and public relations manager. With all the evidence meticulously gathered and organized, it was time to draft the email that would expose Lucas and ensure he faced the consequences of his actions. I needed to be professional yet firm, detailing every aspect of his behavior and the implications of his threats. I began the email with a formal greeting, addressing the CEO, VP of HR, Operations Manager, and Public Relations Manager. I introduced myself as an attorney representing a client who had been victimized by one of their employees, Lucas. Next, I prepared to forward the information to local law enforcement and the FBI. I compiled all the evidence into a detailed report, ensuring it included every screenshot, photo, and message. I reached out to a local law enforcement contact in Lucas's area, providing them with a report and a summary of the situation. Simultaneously, I contacted my friend at the FBI, explaining the case and the federal implications of Lucas's threats. They assured me that this matter would receive the attention it deserved. Within a day, I received a response from Lucas's employer. The CEO's email was brief but conveyed a mix of shock and concern. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We are appalled by Mr. X's behavior and are conducting an immediate internal investigation. He has been suspended pending the outcome." It wasn't long before the internal investigation concluded. Lucas was fired, and his actions were reported to the local authorities by his employer. The company wanted to distance itself from his reprehensible behavior and took swift action to ensure no such incidents would tarnish their reputation in the future. Meanwhile, my contacts in law enforcement and the FBI moved quickly. The local police opened an investigation into Lucas's threats and his workplace misconduct. The FBI, recognizing the severity of the federal crime, added Lucas to a watch list, ensuring he would be arrested if he attempted to enter the United States. Throughout the process, I kept Alicia informed. Each step brought her a little more relief knowing that justice was being served. She was no longer a victim, but a brave individual who stood up against her tormentor with a little help from her attorney friend. The day Alicia received the news about Lucas's firing and impending legal troubles was a turning point. Her relief was palpable. A weight lifted off her shoulders. She hugged me tightly, tears of gratitude streaming down her face, saying, "I don't know what I would have done without you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving me." Meanwhile, Lucas's firing was just the beginning. News of his termination spread quickly within his professional network, and his reputation was irreparably damaged. Colleagues who once respected him now viewed him with disdain and disgust. His LinkedIn profile, which once showcased a successful career, became a testament to his disgrace. No reputable company would consider hiring someone with such a tainted record. In conclusion, Lucas's life had been completely destroyed by his own actions. His career is over, his relationships are gone, his reputation is in tatters, and he faces serious legal trouble. He has fallen from a position of power to a state of utter despair and fear. If he ever gets a comeback from this, which I doubt, I bet he would be careful not to blackmail anyone with their private photos ever again. Honestly, this Lucas guy, beyond being an absolutely disgusting person, is also just like a huge moron. Like, I'm not out here trying to help anybody get better at these heinous crimes, but if you were disgusting enough to try something like this, maybe don't do it in a situation where you're actually in the relationship with that person and they know exactly who you are and can track down where you are, where you work, and report you to the authorities very easily. I mean, I would say, what was this guy thinking? But really, I think that's kind of just the fundamental problem for a guy like this to begin with, thinking. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.